Watchers in the Fourth Dimension.
Maybe subconsciously, I want to press them. It's like talking to a Cheshire cat.
Don't move, lads. It's on automatic.
Hello and welcome back to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension. I'm Anthony.
I'm Diana.
I'm Julie.
And I'm Reilly, and I don't know what these levers do.
This episode, we're getting back to the weird as we head through the Warrior's Gate and ultimately back to End Space. But before we get into that, Reilly's going to take a look at the mail. Over to you, Reilly.
Thank you. Meglos. First up, we have Hayden Chubb, who says, probably the dud of the season. Has a feel about it that suggests what we got in the cupboard because all the other stories fell through. Saying that I do enjoy it as a bit of a harmless throwback, and Tom Baker as Cactus Meglos really scared me as a kid. And I'm sorry, Julie, but I love Lala Ward's costume in this story. But then, although I do adore both Tam and Ward, I slightly prefer Lala's interpretation. I give this 4, I swear, allegiance to Ty, only because at points you need faith to get through some of the serious padding and recaps. Adam Quinton Wright says, mysterious one-word title, guest appearance by the Whovian royalty. This story sounded like it was going to be big, then it only proved good to put me to sleep. Too much filler. Too much canine hating. 2 out of 10 60-inch ponytails on Barbara. Keith Burton writes, Meglos isn't great, but it looks amazing. Interestingly, when he came to novelize it, Terrence Dix tidied up a lot of the plot holes you spoke about. He was known for taking out his literary trowel and smoothing over other writers' inconsistencies. He also gives the human character a name, George Morris, and a coda where the TARDIS drops him back at his house only a few minutes later than normal. His wife asks how his day at the bank was. He contemplates telling her the truth, but decides against it and just sits down and has his tea instead. 6 redimensioned dodecahedrons out of 10.
So he does what any British person does and just drinks a cup of tea?
Basically, yes.
Okay, perfect.
Kieran James Evans says, definitely the weakest of the season. Feels almost like a leftover from the previous season. Meglos was set to seek his vengeance on the Doctor in the original script for the Lodger from Series 5. Wow, okay.
What?
Yes, that's strange. The joke in the episode being that the Doctor can't remember him at all.
That would have been amazing.
That said, there are some creepy elements, and the use of scene sync for the Zolfa Thuron sequences helps with the overall visuals. It gets 3 out of 10 pathetic Earthmen. I like that. Nicholas Rutherford says, I'm with Reilly. It's not good, but it's not as bad as most of Season 17. Stephen Merchant's dad is the Earthling. Yes, I see it. Although he reminded me of David Tennant minus the acting talent. Even watching as a 12-year-old in 1980, it seemed to step back after the bold new direction of the Leisure Hive. But I do like Tom the Megalomaniac as a megalomaniac cactus. Tony Monticello writes, yes, Meglos, a timeless Doctor Who classic in which the office cactus makes its acting debut. Truly one for the ages. David Gorton says, Meglos, or as we knew it back in the day, Deadlos. After a strong opening to this run, we go back down again, albeit not quite as bad as the creature from the pit or the Horns of Daimon. Jackie Hill is sadly wasted in this role, but as stated by the panel, is still head and shoulders above any of the other guest actors. Couple of trivia points. First, a sad one. This is now the oldest story of Doctor Who in which the writers are still with us. Secondly, this is the only story in 20th Century Who where the credited cast is the same for every episode. And on the whole, though, not a lot to commend it. A generous 3 tail waggles out of 10.
You know, I have one remark to that, and that is, sir, Meglos makes the Horns of Daimon look like fucking Shakespeare. How dare you suggest it's somehow inferior to Meglos?
Mark Dunstan writes, a clunker really looks like a cheap studio runaround. Another race of aliens with blonde hairs styled by Vidal Sassoon. Poor Jacqueline Hill. I wish she was not in it, although she is fantastic and looks great. Why could she not have been Barbara? Poor script and some crap actors like Bill Fraser. Just the call out there, apparently. Just bang. Okay.
Dang.
Tom Baker looked great covered in pricks. I give the story 2 cactus pricks out of 10.
Oh my god.
Best description ever. Thank you.
Beardo Beatnik says, I love it when we don't see eye to eye on some episodes, watchers. I think Meglos is a fun, albeit a pointless endeavor. But as usual, y'all's charm and wit help us to see the rot in crawling cactus. But my main question remains, how in the hell did Lexa keep that obnoxious hat hair contraption on her head? 5.5 creepy cactus. Well, I guess maybe that would be cacti out of 10.
Sometimes I think Biddo is just out to troll us.
Maybe.
Sometimes.
The 12th Rising writes, yes, Meglos, a story that would have fitted into Season 17, but is so out of place in Season 18. Sandwiched between the promise of the Leisure Hive and the excellence of Full Circle. Really? The excellence? Okay. It's a case of what was everybody thinking with this story? A talking cactus as the villain? A tired old religion versus progress storyline? Very poor acting from most of the cast? Ridiculous wigs and costumes? Not sure why the space pirates are all dressed up in Imperial Russian gear. The few pluses are that Jacqueline Hill is a welcome return to the show, though it was a waste of her talent. It's the final story with just the fourth Doctor Romana with K9, and Tom Baker and Lala Ward are on sparkling form here. And the screens of Zulfa Thura were impressive for their time, as was the use of scene sync. Not sure it was never used again. An overall mess, though this is the last time that Tom Baker seems to be having fun with the fourth Doctor, and it's the main reason to watch the story, if nothing else. Alex? Oh, Alex, my old friend. Alex Kafazjoglu says... Kafazjoglu says, I don't really like Meglos, but I went to the Doctor Who exhibition at Madame Tussauds, so it still always brings back some lovely memories for me. I wonder, is that still going on? That might be a little bit of fun.
It's not. They now have the heads in a box somewhere.
Oh, all right. Well then... The Crank Institute says, sneaky suspicion this whole story just exists as a way for the production team to mock Tom for being increasingly prickly. That's pretty good. I like that. J. David Holt says, for Creature of the Pit, I commented that I was getting it confused with a story from next season, and this is it. Both are pretty bad stories, which are unintentionally funny because of it. Like you mentioned, though, there really isn't anything to say about the story. The most notable thing is that every time Jacqueline Hill was on screen, I was so involved in her performance that I stopped paying attention to the rest of the story and wish I was watching a Hartnell story instead. The idea of the Doctor being impersonated is interesting as a concept, but I really can't get invested in this at all. I gave Creature of the Pit a 3, and to me, this is exactly the same story, so it also gets a 3, they're coming for you, Barbaras, out of 10. I like the classic horror reference there a lot. Okay, here's a good one. Tony Bowers writes in and says, hey guys, long-time listener, first-time commenter here. I just wanted to drop you a line to let you know how much I enjoyed your most recent episode about the Meglos serial. The story has a special place in my heart because when the local PBS station started airing Doctor Who back in the 80s, they used the picture of Tom in the cactus makeup in all promotional materials for the local TV listings. Interesting choice. I have often wondered how people felt who tune in only to see the Doctor without what appeared to be a terrible case of acne. Thanks and keep up the great work. That is a very odd choice for them to do that. But I do like hearing everyone talking about people over here growing up in America, catching Doctor Who first time on PBS in the early 80s. That was my first experience, and I don't know, I think there was something special about that. And we're going to wrap up with J.K. Ravel, who writes, Meglos, exactly as exciting as you'd expect a story about a potted cactus to be. 2 out of 10 xerophetic pincushions. And Anthony, that is the mail. Back to you.
Thank you for that, Reilly. And as a reminder to our listeners, we really do love getting your feedback, thoughts, comments, and questions. And we do try to read out as many of them as possible on the show. So please do get in touch. As usual, you can contact us through Facebook and Instagram at Watchers4D, or you can email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. And additionally, we would absolutely love it if you subscribe to the podcast, if you're not doing so already, and if you dropped us a review or rating on your podcast platform of choice. Both of those things really do help get the word out about the show. Now, heading behind the scenes on Warrior's Gate. After script editor Christopher H. Bidmead had gained approval from producer John Nathan Turner for the E-Space Trilogy story arc, he had to now assemble the saga. Terrence Dick's State of Decay was quickly revised to serve as the middle chapter, and Andrew Smith's Full Circle served as the opening installment. For the concluding serial, Bidmead eyed up sealed orders from Christopher Priest, a science fiction author he liked. With a premise which dealt with time paradoxes, it was exactly the kind of high-concept sci-fi that Bidmead wanted to showcase in the show. Priest was commissioned to develop his storyline in late February 1980 and to write the 4 scripts at the end of March. However, Bidmead soon realized that Priest's experience was as an author of prose and not as a television scriptwriter, and as such, he decided to commission a backup story which could replace sealed orders at short notice. For this backup, Bidmead turned to Stephen Gallagher, whose science fiction radio drama An Alternative to Suicide had been brought to the attention of the Doctor Who production office. A longtime fan of the show, Gallagher developed a storyline called Dreamtime. Based on unused concepts for a sequel to his radio play and novel The Last Rose of Summer, it was commissioned in mid-March. Dreamtime could be adapted to take the place of sealed orders if necessary, but was also written to stand on its own and be used during season 19. Over the coming weeks, Bidmead's concerns came to pass when Priest's scripts were deemed unsuitable for television production. Bidmead turned his attention to Dreamtime, and Gallagher was commissioned to write the 4 scripts in mid-April. The original idea for Dreamtime, developed before Gallagher's discussions with Bidmead, involved a person discovering the home of a forgotten civilization where a hall of mirrors provided access to parallel worlds. This was inspired by the Dreamtime, the metaphysical time outside time, also called the Dreaming or Alcaringa, and maybe someone will correct me on the pronunciation of that, which is apparently part of the belief system of the Australian Aborigines. In adapting this concept to Doctor Who, Gallagher was influenced by the films of the French surrealist Jean Cocteau, particularly 1946's La Belle et la Bête and 1949's Orphée. He also drew upon elements of Alfred Bester's 1953 novel The Demolished Man, which dealt with the telepathic prediction of future events. By midsummer, the serial had gained its final title of Warrior's Gate. Gallagher had earlier rejected Bidmead's suggestion of Gateway, which he felt would invite confusion with Frederick Pohl's novel of the same name. The sensitive race at the heart of the story were originally called the Calibans, after the half-human slave of Shakespeare's The Tempest. The 2 most prominent Calibans, Birrock and Laszlo, were named for Academy Award-winning cinematographers Joseph Birrock and Ernest Laszlo. Among the humans, Rorvik and Sagan were named for American authors. David Rorvik wrote the infamous 1978 hoax In His Image, The Cloning of a Man, while astrophysicist Carl Sagan, at that stage of his career, was best known for his 1977 Pulitzer Prize winner, The Dragon of Eden, Speculations on the Evolution of Human Intelligence. The director assigned to Dreamtime was Paul Joyce, who had recently directed an edition of Play for Today that John Nathan Turner really liked, and Joyce was keen on Gallagher's Cocteau-filled imagery and wanted this influence to extend throughout the production. He envisaged making the story in the style of a feature film and was enthusiastic about pushing the boundaries of what could be accomplished with a Doctor Who production. However, Joyce became concerned that, like Priest before him, Gallagher's inexperience in writing for television was resulting in scripts that would not translate well to television. By late summer, Gallagher had to move on to other work, and so at the end of August, Joyce received formal permission to make significant changes to the scripts. However, out of respect for Gallagher, he refused to take a writing credit. Among many other things, there's something extremely nerdy that Joyce changed, and that was the renaming of the Calibans. Initially, they were the Tharks, then the Thars, and then the Tharils, with an R in there. And a final change to their name came at the intervention of fan advisor Ian Levine, who was concerned that long-term fans might confuse the Tharils with the Tharls, the natives of the planet Skaro, who had of course appeared in 1963's The Daleks, 1973's Planet of the Daleks, and 1975's Genesis of the Daleks. Maybe we should just call this story Warrior's Gate of the Daleks. Joining Joyce's behind-the-scenes team, we have a host of returning faces. Angela Smith continues as production unit manager, Graham Story returns to the show as designer, having previously handled Season 17's The Horns of Nimon. June Hudson returns to provide costumes, and of course, she has been a prolific contributor since Season 16. And last but not least, Peter Howell returns as composer, having previously handled incidental music for The Leisure Hive and Meglos. Now, all was not well during production on this. Very early on, production assistant Graham Harper, who was already a Doctor Who veteran by this stage, became increasingly worried that Joyce was not adequately planning the creatively and technically complex recording, and conveyed his concerns to Nathan Turner. Studio recording was originally due to begin in early September, but it was agreed that these dates would be delayed to allow for more preparation time, especially since the scripts remained in flux. The first studio block was scheduled for mid-September, only to be further postponed at the last minute due to a carpenter's strike. The atmosphere during rehearsals was tense. Tom Baker and Lala Ward, who had got back together some weeks earlier, were fighting. Baker was also still not recovered from the illness he had been suffering from since March, and his mood was made worse by Ward's impending departure from the show. Both actors were also deeply unhappy with their dialogue, which resulted in several scenes being substantially rewritten. Ward also disliked the fact that Romana's final scene was written so dispassionately, but Nathan Turner and Bidmead were adamant that they did not want soap opera elements to creep into Doctor Who. Damn it. At the beginning of September, Joyce travelled to Powys Castle, a 13th century edifice in Powys, Wales, to shoot photos which would be inserted as backgrounds for the gateway sequences. The first studio session was intended to concentrate on scenes aboard the privateer, but there was an immediate delay when Joyce's decision to incorporate the studio lighting gantry into the spaceship set drew the objections of John Dixon, who oversaw lighting. Recording was thus delayed for 2 hours, and Joyce came close to relieving Dixon of his duties, and as a result, only a small number of scenes were actually recorded. By this stage, Nathan Turner had lost confidence in Joyce's ability to complete Warrior's Gate and contemplated firing him. With Joyce having been so closely involved in developing the final drafts of the scripts, however, the producer decided to keep him around. The final 2 days of the block remained fraught, even with Harper taking a larger role in running the shoot. And despite losing even more time due to safety concerns with some of the sets, Joyce managed to squeeze in some TARDIS sequences on the last day, but he remained far behind schedule. By the time the second 3-day block began at the beginning of October, the production was visibly taking its toll on Joyce. Nathan Turner was having serious discussions with head of series and serials, Graham MacDonald, who expressed his concern about the situation. And during this session, the relationship between Joyce and Nathan Turner deteriorated to the point that the director was told that he was fired, only for Nathan Turner to relent a very short time later and bring him back on board. Oh boy. By the end of shooting, Joyce was so fatigued that Harper had largely taken over the production with assistance from John Nathan Turner. These events cast a shadow over Ward and Leeson's final day on Doctor Who, and neither Ward nor Baker appeared at the subsequent wrap party. 2 months later, on December the 13th, many friends were surprised to learn that the pair had married. And I don't think it'll be of any surprise to anyone that their marriage would end in divorce just 16 months later.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was originally planned that Part 1 of Warrior's Gate would air on December the 20th, the week after State of Decay's Lost part. However, it was ultimately decided that the show would be rested over the holiday period, as had been the case in seasons before Season 17, and the show returned with Part 1 of Warrior's Gate on January the 3rd, 1981, and as usual, it aired on successive Saturdays through to January 24th. Now, despite the chaos surrounding the making of the story, Nathan Turner was actually very, very happy with the finished serial. Joyce wrote to him to apologize for the whole thing at the end of January 1981, but unfortunately Nathan Turner was effectively obliged to remove him from consideration from any future Doctor Who work. The tense production also deterred Bidmead from extending his contract as script editor beyond the season. He felt that he was expending too much time and energy on Doctor Who without suitable respect or reward, and his working relationship with Nathan Turner was beginning to deteriorate. Like Baker before him, Bidmead's decision became final when his request for a substantial raise was rejected. And with that, before we go ahead and discuss the story, I believe Diana has the short summary of this episode. Over to you, Diana.
This story, the gang find themselves in a void tucked neatly between in and east space, where time and space doesn't work right and is exponentially condensing. Meanwhile, the Doctor follows his new lion friend to build out the backstory. Adric's not doing too much, flipping coins and wandering into the corner of the soundstage. Meanwhile, also annoying Romana, who is tasked with most of the heavy lifting for this story, leaving her quite annoyed with the boys and realizing her own agency while getting her brain zapped. Slavers are blown up, slaves gain freedom, and Romana decides to leave the gang to rebranch as a staunch abolitionist because the magical time-traipsing, formerly abusive elitist lions could never survive in the dream world they built by themselves. Most importantly, K9 is tossed about and left behind with Romana because there's no way he would ever be operational again on this side of the looking glass. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Diana. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Part 1. We get to start with some extreme close-ups and an element of kind of an alien-style spaceship. Very grimy, very nasty.
I actually really liked that opening sequence.
I did too. It flows really well. It's an ambitious shot. It really is, to just keep flowing the camera all around, getting that height as well. It was ambitious, and it really, I think, set the stage for what is a visually interesting serial.
Yes. For sure.
And also the choice of choosing the breathing apparatus to be the absolute first thing was a great choice.
Yeah, what I'm just thinking about was the opening to the movie Alien, where you just see the ship and you hear the ship doing its ship noises, and then you see people in a cryo sleep. In this case, it's our little lion buddies. And then you see everyone else working with the ship. But I think with Alien, it had more dissolves. This was just kind of panning and then cuts, and then that's about it. But still, I was quite pleased with it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I don't know what this is, 2 years on from Alien. It's definitely taking inspiration from it.
Yeah.
And it gives it a much more feature film feel than we used to on Doctor Who.
And it's also a lot more engaging than a lot of the openings that we usually have. Usually it's like, oh, this is our scene establishment shot. 10 minutes on Brighton Beach. And this one, I found myself being, even though I've seen it and I remember this one, watching it, I was engaged and I was curious about what was coming next. And just more engaged in that scene setup than I usually find that I am with the opening shots of Doctor Who.
Yeah, and it definitely sets up a lot of questions. For example, why are they torturing the cowardly lion?
Oh,
It was so sad.
You know, I felt that way, and I was like, okay, we're going to go in that direction. And then when we get around to part 3, and I was come to the realization, like, wow, they're kind of dicks too. So it just evens out.
And then you throw in the fact that they need a Time Lord in there. I'm like, you need more dicks?
yeah, right.
When did we decide that we need just all the races that are dicks to be a part of this?
I also find it humorous how the alien race, they have a really bad habit of not making eye contact when talking.
Oh, I hadn't noticed that.
They
Interesting.
rarely look at someone, not just not look them in the eyes. I'm talking fully turned away from them. That seemed to be an effect that was done consistently in all the shots.
No, you're for, yeah.
And I feel like that was trying to give the message about how they see time. So how they look at things is different than how we look at things. So therefore, they're always looking off into the distance.
Is it because of how they look at time, or is it because they think they're better than everyone else and can't be actually worthwhile to look at people?
That's it.
Maybe a little column A, maybe a little column B. I did actually think the concept of needing time sensitive to navigate for the spaceships, that reminded me a lot of the Guild navigators in June.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that wasn't just me.
No, I was thinking the exact same thing, and then I was disappointed because I was thinking about in the original Dune how the navigators looked in that, the Lynch version, and I was thinking like, wow, they get crazy calamari whale people, and we get Teddy Ruxpin. So, you know...
I'm so glad I didn't make that connection while I watched this.
Well, that was the problem with the makeup on them. It's just, I understand you look at it, it's a lion, but it's just those cute little ears they put up on the top. It's like a teddy bear, you know? And if it wasn't that, I was thinking about and of course, this goes back to your reference, Anthony, and their background about Beauty and the Beast. That's obviously what they're pulling from. And I was thinking of the 1980s television show Beauty and the Beast, for the makeup they put on Ron Perlman.
Yes.
Obvious a better job than they did here because it's a major American primetime television series back then. But yeah, all that was going through my mind.
Same. I had a note that I thought it was from the Beauty and the Beast on Ice from like 94, but it's definitely Ron Perlman.
Yeah. Can you imagine them making a show like that today? No, they wouldn't.
All right, there are two big things I want to talk about. Firstly, in the TARDIS, the Doctor's kind of an asshole for the way he chastises Romana for how she's flying the TARDIS, and then he can't do any better. However, and this was present, I want to say, in the previous story, I do love the fact that the Doctor's old coat and scarf are hanging on the hat stand behind him.
Yeah, I liked that too. But I didn't really like how quippy the TARDIS gang were. Like, nobody seemed to like each other by the end of this episode.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely not.
I wasn't like super into that vibe because there's not, okay, other than the fact that I get it, Adric's annoying. But not to the point where everybody is biting each other's heads off. It seemed like the whole time.
It's one of those where he's just kind of that little annoying kid that you're like, why are you here? But I'm not going to sit there and berate you because you're not a terrible human being.
Yeah.
It was a little frustrating. And then obviously, you know, K9 gets dealt dirty again.
Oh, repeatedly.
So bad.
Repeatedly.
I am so mad about this. I don't understand why we all of a sudden had to have a vendetta against K9. It made zero sense to me.
Yeah, and I feel like it all just kind of kicked off with the doctor being so rude to Romana at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Their relationship is weird anyway, but especially to go from like, I'm going to berate her and I'm going to bite her head off to the end being like, oh, she's such a jewel. They are so lucky to have her. Like, it's just...
You know what that is? That's an abusive boss. That's an abusive
Right.
employment situation. It's good that she got out of that.
Speaking of abusive bosses,
Oh,
boy.
Vic,
Oh,
we
boy.
are truly back to the bad boss trope.
Yeah, but I will give this guy some bit of credit here. One is that he looks like Space Robert E. Lee.
I'm so dead.
And two, I really enjoyed the fact that he had more depth than the normal bad boss character. And also, as our main villain, he doesn't care about taking over the world. He just wants to get the hell out of there. And then at the end, it seems to be that he shifts, and it isn't a question about escaping with his crew or with whatever money they would get from their slave trading. At the end, he just wants to get something accomplished, anything. And I find that really, really funny because I guess they're tied into the idea of, I don't know if we have normal lifespans in our e-space, in-space nonsense that we're doing here, but if we don't, and they have like elongated time there where they don't age, I can totally understand that. He's basically in limbo with nothing to do. So I enjoyed that.
With nothing to do, but everything to do because he has all the time to do the nothing.
Yes, yes,
But I would also imagine a finite number of resources.
yes. And
That's
energy.
the bigger problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they had any ladies on their ship.
No.
That was going to be problematic.
Obviously, they would not touch on this on Doctor Who, not back then. But when Romana walks over with them to their ship, I felt really nervous for her. I was like, you have a bunch of
Yeah.
men on a ship by themselves, and they've been alone for a really long time. Like, this is not a safe place
Mhm.
at all.
Can we talk about the two, for lack of a better term, the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern characters?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're
Mhm.
great.
I love them.
Did anyone
did
not
too.
call them Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in their
No.
notes?
Absolutely not.
And I love that the first thing that they do is they do the yay, like in Monty Python.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was brilliant. I was like, these guys really don't care. And they're trying to do as little as possible, but they're also just trying to be like under the radar. So they don't want to be seen as not doing anything, but they want to not do anything. Kind of brilliant. I'm like, I get you on this certain level because I wish I could be that person, but I actually have to do the things.
Yeah. And they were great because I feel like the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern trope is used heavily
Mhm.
in comedy and like comedic works and that kind of thing. Often not well because they're actually quite complex characters. And they did a great job with these two guys because in those opening scenes, when they are talking absolute, and I'll use the word from the episode, gobbledygook, on time and engines and how they're using the time sensitive. And it's just complete jargon that would make sense on the ship. And by panning through their experience in all of this, you are told immediately that this is routine and normal. And something shady is happening before you even see the time sensitive because of how much they're like, I wonder if they're going to survive 5 minutes. And it normalized this very odd scene.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that.
And I thought they were utilized throughout the series very much in the voyeuristic aspect of like, this is crazy what's going on. I don't want to be involved.
Yeah, they definitely do hit on some things where they decide to show it through kind of their eyes instead of some of the others. Like when they're trying to resuscitate one of our lion guys, and you're just like, whoa, what are we doing here?
It also softens it a bit because it is horrific what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And to have those two characters involved with it, part of me felt like this is comedic, so this is lightening the mood. But then the other part of me was thinking about how callous and truly how much they don't care. I'm talking our leader here, our bad boss, because he knows damn well those two guys aren't going to be effective or are going to do a very detailed job and take good care of their, quote, cargo. So it's just even more a disrespect for those little lion buddies.
Yeah. What's interesting is we get our hints in this episode that these guys are slavers.
Yeah.
It's made very clear later on when the doctor says something like, it's a slave ship. But at this point, we're hearing about, the crew gets a bonus for ensuring that their entire cargo reaches their destination in good condition. We kind of see in that opening shot, the Tharils are the cargo. So it's not explicit, but it's hinted at here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the observant will make that connection and the kids won't.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the weird?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that set, man.
Is this the kind of weird you wanted, Reilly?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I could have gone for a bit more. If our crew on that ship were crazy-ass aliens, then I think I'd be fully set.
If only there'd been a bunch of Zarbi, damn it.
I know. But I love the stark white backdrop, the sets, what do you want to call it? Just basically a whited out soundstage. And it really is amazing because it puts your focus so much on the rare object that you see there. And I will say that the ship that they have looked really good.
Oh, so good.
Really sharp. And then, of course, you have the contrast of that ship and then a crumbling church/monastery type of stone structure. It's just really great to look at. And then in between that, you have our little lion friend making a run for it, phasing in and out, going around, and then walking onto the TARDIS. And I still haven't quite figured out what the hell he was doing on the TARDIS, other than just kind of making his presence felt. That's about it.
Yeah. I want to talk about that because he gives the TARDIS crew a warning and says, others follow, do not believe what they say, they are not Birok's kind. Then K9 tells the Doctor, Romana, and Adric that there are 3 people approaching the TARDIS. Literally after Birok has told them others are following. And Adric accuses poor K9 of having delusions.
Yeah.
Well, let's remember, Adric, he's not the smartest.
No.
He only knows calculus, guys.
Yeah. Is he ever going to take off that medal?
No.
Oh, boy.
Eventually.
Okay.
And then he just wears it on his heart.
And while we're on what people are wearing, I think it is fitting that I have felt throughout Romana 2's tenure that she has always been dressed like a type of occupation, be it schoolgirl, ringmaster, equestrian rider, but she's wrapped it all up with cult leader, and I think it was a great move.
I would follow that cult.
Yes.
I figured you would.
When we get some time wins, don't forget the time wins. That's what sets everything off with K9.
And the Doctor's hand, so we get plenty of exposition in part 2. But as we get to the end of part 1, inside the church monastery thing, there's a cobweb banqueting hall and a mirror that Birok walks through. And of course, the Doctor, once he gets in there, he can't help himself. He has to start dusting off the suits of armor. And then one of them goes to attack him with an axe, and that's our cliffhanger, and we're into part 2.
Mechanical skeleton knights.
Love it.
I loved it.
Yes.
Son of a bitch, I'm in.
It was so good. I like everything about them. I was obsessed with. I was like, this is it. I was 100% here for them.
They looked great. There was a wonderful kind of sheen, almost like a polychrome kind of sheen off of them that I thought was really good job by the costume department.
And there was the moment where he was like, at the end where he was fixing their helmets, and the way that one of them moved, I went, oh, there's a person in there. Yes. Because they just looked so good. I even went to look up what video games had been out around this time because they look so inspired by video games, but definitely not. We are not in the era of too much more than text-based games, which is really impressive to me. I feel like I've seen those guys on the cover of Doom.
Oh, yeah.
One thing I enjoyed when we're in our part 2 and the way that they used the music and they did the start, stop, I really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really fun.
Yeah.
The music held up very well.
Yeah, Peter Howell generally did a good job on this one.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to point out that it's quite funny to me that this being Romana's last serial, I'm not making a joke here. I'm dead serious. I think the scene where Romana comes out of the TARDIS and speaks to the crew, how she acts, her movement, everything about it, that is honestly the best acting that Lala Ward has done on the show entirely. And it's just hilarious to me that it happens to be in the very last serial that she's in. But there was something about her in that I really enjoyed. It's like she was mysterious and dangerous and almost to the point where she was putting on a character for her own enjoyment to confuse and confound these guys. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's very Troughton-esque.
Mm-hmm.
And the way she does it, it feels very ethereal. And you're right, Reilly. I think it's one of her strongest performances. And we can talk about it more, but I feel like we've slowly seen her becoming the Doctor more and more. And this is where that reaches its apotheosis. Mm-hmm. I've always wanted to use that word on the podcast. I just like saying apotheosis, okay, guys?
And then what was confusing, though, is that we have that high point. And, of course, she gets captured. So we go with that trope again. But I would say what makes it even worse is that, and I know I'm jumping ahead here, there's other things we want to talk about in part 2. But while we're on the topic of Romana and being on the ship, the cliffhanger of part 2, why the hell is she frightened? She knows exactly what that is. It's a Tharil, and she knows that they're being exploited. So why is she terrified of it? If anything, her expectation would be, at worst, this thing's going to look at me and say, better you than me, and just keep walking on.
But it's a horribly burned and scarred Tharil that may or may not be a zombie.
Did you see that? He didn't look that horribly burned.
Yeah, I thought that it was a little bit much, but I feel like, considering that all we've seen is a phasing in and out Tharil, and this guy did show up with like half his face just completely Phantom of the Opera off. And the way that they had at the cliffhanger, it reaching out at her face, and then you see in the next episode where he immediately shifts down to the cuff. Clearly doing it for the camera, buddy. If something, that big and, she's in an unfamiliar situation, I get the fear, but especially when this whole serial is working so hard at building Romana, good God. As for her to be able to be this standing on her own 2 feet, I can do anything the Doctor can do. The Doctor doesn't sit there and scream. He makes a face, he might gasp, but there's a quip, not a scream. That was disappointing for me, but,
Yeah.
But I did like her in the rest of the serial.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, agreed. I have a question about one major design choice that makes zero sense to me. This really random bulky ass machine that this man walks around with on his chest.
I love it. It's the printer and a BabyBjörn.
Oh, amazing.
And I love that the end he starts complaining about it. So maybe it was kind of an inside joke on the crew to come up with it, put this poor actor. And I believe that character's name was Packard. I believe
Packard,
it was.
Yes.
I really wanted to hear someone yell out Packard.
I know. Yeah, Rovik or whatever would have been great. It would have been such a great callback. I know. The good old days. And while we're talking about odd things, I know K9 has been beat up and time-winded and all this nonsense in the serial. Why is it that he has 2 scenes, one in part 2, where when he enters the scene, he enters it ass backwards?
They're trying to show off of how bad condition he's in.
Okay. All right. To me, I just feel like the shot was awkward. I think, add some smoke coming off of him or something. I don't know.
I think it also was trying to play into the concept of the non-determinative structure that controls. Yeah. It what's the Greek lady that always, Cassandra, the prophet that always says shit and no one believes her?
Yep.
He was kind of giving me that vibe through the whole thing, because he's spouting all this nonsense, but you actually listen to it and you put it together right and it makes sense. He was going backwards the whole time, but he still ended up at the cobwebby place. He always ended up in the right spot. He was always there. And Mr. Lionel was definitely like, he will end here. it worked for him. And I think that was the point of all of that. It's just that K9's just been done so dirty this whole time that ending him with this Cassandra vibe doesn't help.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some truly disrespectful stuff happens.
Yeah.
The toss out from the ship by the crew member.
For the heavy K9 to go in, for them to just toss out the fiber one.
I mean, yeah. Whew.
It's fine, though, because at the end of this season, we're going to get a K9 and Sarah Jane special.
And it's good, right? Right.
We'll see.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, boy. Yeah, it's interesting how they lean so heavily into the I Ching this story.
Yeah. And it doesn't really pay off, does it? Not in my
No,
opinion.
just lots of coin tossing. Lots of coin tossing.
They had to give Adric something to do, right?
Golly.
Just having toss coins all episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, for like 2 episodes. They just like pan to him, coin toss, walk in a different direction. Oh, poor
That
Adric.
is literally all they gave him to do. And I'm like, it's fine.
One thing that I think is so interesting about this story is the humans all the way through. I mean, the first 2 episodes are really built up as abusing the Tharils. They're tying them to a chair, using them as navigators. They're willing to fry them to try and find one that can steer the ship for them. And there's very little compassion for them. Meanwhile, as we're starting to hear from the Gundam robots that they were made by slaves to kill the brutes who rule, eventually, and just to spoilers for part 3, that turns out to be the Tharils. So we've got these slavers who are enslaving former slavers. So that empathy and compassion for the Tharils is soon swept away.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice. They undercut it, and I really think that is a brave, bold decision. And I think I hate to say the word lesson here or message, but I feel that it's about forgiveness and redemption, and that the Tharils have understood what they did was wrong, and they have now taken steps to change that, while our slaver crew has not come to that realization yet. So it's the opportunity for redemption, I think, and the opportunity to be willing to forgive. But I thought that was a really bold choice, and especially the way they showed it, because they could have easily, in that scene at the banquet table, when they push that appeared to be human woman, it's probably not, but a humanoid-looking alien, that really strikes a chord with us human beings watching it as the audience. They could have easily had the barmaid be an alien with 3 heads that has a snout that looks reptilian, looks nothing like us, but they intentionally put someone up there who looks human. So it was a bold choice, and I like it.
Yeah, I thought it was specifically bold considering the fact that they had Romana leave with them at the end.
Right.
Because they needed a Time Lord.
And I'm still confused about that a little bit. Could someone help me?
No.
No.
Okay, all right.
I love you guys. We've already talked about the cliffhanger to this.
Well, yeah, but let's not forget one great part is we have, for our crew, part 3 is them spending most of their time trying to figure out how to get through the mirror.
Yes, so we're into part 3.
Yes, and there's this hilarious part where Rovik is shouting at his crew, no brute force. And then they back up and someone tries to blow it away with a laser. And then later on, he just literally tries to kick it.
Yeah.
These guys are idiots.
I know. I think they're trying to emphasize their utter desperation, but to me, it was hilarious.
I did catch one technical mishap about 10 minutes into the episode, because after Romana and Adric hide under the moon rover thing and all of the guys come down the stairs and they're having, whatever conversation about the MZ, I'm sorry. You can see the boom mic underneath the stairs.
Oh.
And it made me giggle because I was like, yeah, that is an awkward scene, I guess, to try and have that boom mic. So they popped it up under the stairs. So about 10 minutes and 20 seconds in.
Good to know. I'm sure there's a website out there that compiles all of these, but now from this point on, Diana is going to be our official blooper catcher.
I was so excited to catch that because I never catch them. I usually have to go back and look. And I was like, oh, yes, boom mic, yes.
Normally something I read points them out, but nothing pointed that out for this story. So good catch.
Yeah, I thought it was one of the more obvious ones I've ever seen because you can see the full mic.
I never catch them. Do not ask me
I
to
usually
do
don't
it.
either.
I will not see it.
So this episode, K9 gets abused even more. He gets kicked by Rorvik, and as K9 goes to shoot him, he runs out of power. Is this the episode where he also gets thrown, or is that part 4?
You mean tossed? That was, I think, it's either part 2 or part 3.
It was part 3, because I wrote, the way he yeeted K9.
He sure did.
Poor K9.
Just abused.
I mean, it's bad enough, but it's made even worse that it's the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
The last serial, I mean.
Exactly.
But this is interesting in how you mentioned the behind the scenes for a serial of Doctor Who that says goodbye to 2 companions. There is, as you said, no emotion there. It's more like, okay, you're going to do that, bye. It's very striking, and we've had that happen before with other companions, but this time it was incredibly abrupt and without any sort of sentimentality.
Yeah.
I hope that K9 gets a better ending later. Hint, hint.
Well, I think we spent a lot of this episode just running around getting recaptured.
I think Adric kind of comes into play, but not really.
Yeah, what was Adric up to for the first 2 episodes?
Flipping a
coins.
coin.
Flipping a
We've
coin,
said
yeah.
it.
And I really thought that was going to like pay off in some kind of line somewhere. But
No.
he just pops up to annoy Romana some more.
Yep.
Nobody mentions like, how'd you get here? How'd you find your way? Nothing.
I do love how after Adric and Romana have hidden under the covers of the MZ, and immediately Romana wants back onto the ship, and Adric's response is, but I just rescued you. What if she didn't want to be rescued, Adric?
He's just trying so hard.
Yeah. The stuff with Rorvik and crew trying to blast the mirror is kind of hilarious, particularly the moment that Romana and Laszlo, who is not related to either Laszlo Cravensworth or Ken Laszlo, but never mind on that, they just waltz past Rorvik and his crew right as they're getting ready to blast the mirror and just walk through the mirror. And there's not a lot of comedy in this story, but that one moment did get a little giggle from me.
Yeah, it is really funny how the crew and Rorvik are as ineffectual as they could possibly be in everything they do.
How were these guys ever successful in anything?
Yeah, it's beyond me.
There's also a really nice scene with the Doctor towards the end, which is where he's sitting at the table with the Tharils just as the Gundans are coming. And he fills up a cup with wine and then immediately knocks it over with rage. And that scene is just so well played and really shows his anger at the situation. It's well done.
Yes, give us more Gundam. We love Gundam here.
Please.
Gundam style.
I was like, is it going to happen? Who's going to do it?
Okay.
Part 4.
We see the attack, and that leads us into the Doctor and Romana phasing back into the dining room with Rorvik, and that's our cliffhanger, and we're into part 4.
Oh, part 4. My favorite part is, of course, what I referenced at the very beginning of our recording. And my favorite part is Adric. In this,
Yes.
because he brings out that giant satellite dish laser thing. I don't know what it is, and neither does he. And I love his delivery so much, in which there's so many ways you could give that line. And you see it done oftentimes where the character is a badass or just being a joker and say, like, I don't know what these things do. But Adric is being brutally honest. He has no idea what these things do. And he says it to him like, honestly, I'm a danger to myself and everyone else here. This is something I have no responsibility for. Just please let the Doctor go. And I loved it. I, at that moment, realized that, okay, if you can give me an Adric that's like this, that is intentionally just purely unable to do anything, that just happens to be a plot device that gets us out of one situation or into another, I'm totally fine with it.
I thought that moment was so quintessentially everything I love about Adric's character. Just the deadpan, I don't know what this does, but it is pointed at you. I'll push the button. And then making up that it was like set on automatic.
Right.
And all of the guys being like, oh man, yeah, absolutely. And the captain being like, you dipshits.
There is no automatic.
It was brilliant.
Can one of our listeners please update the meme with the guy picking the red buttons and replace it with Adric, please? Because I would love it. Thank you.
That would be good. What would each side say? I'm assuming I don't know what this one does. I don't know what this one does either.
Just like text titles, but in like web dings.
Oh, yeah, that works too. Well, that's how we get our escape right there.
Before that, though, very early on, there is a line that I really, really enjoyed, which is, unless we work very closely together, we could be caught here until the crack of doom.
Oh, yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, is this at the point where it's been revealed by K9 that things are contracting?
Yes.
And Roverick and his crew don't believe, and so we get our escape.
The one guy believes because he's like, well, it's gotten shorter each time.
Yeah.
My big chest unit tells me that.
Packard!
Well, and they had been dropping it as they continue to go back and forth, where every time he has like some sideline about like, hey, that felt shorter. Did that feel shorter to anybody else? No? Okay.
And we get back to the TARDIS, and there we see that after they went through an explosion in the monastery, even though it's not on automatic, they get out of there, and they've decided that they're just going to turn all the engines of the ship onto the mirror to try to break it, in which the doctors have tried to explain that that will not work. And we have our interesting handing off scene, I would argue, in which the doctors tells Romana, if I'm not back in 13 and a half minutes, dematerialize. And then Romana tells Adric, if I'm not back in 13 and a half minutes, dematerialize. That's more of our foreshadowing of her being on her own.
And actually, we completely glossed over it, but there was that mention right in part 1 where Adric's talking about being on the TARDIS, and Romana said something about, what if we're not all together? This has been foreshadowed since part 1.
Yeah, guess what? I didn't really take notice of it. So I get to the end, I'm just like, what?
No, I mean, I'm only saying that from my perspective now, Julie. I'm right there with you. I had no idea when she's like, I'm going to hang out with the Battle Cats, Thunder Cats, whatever they are, and just stay here. I was like, what? What are you doing? You can't leave me with Adric, Romana. Why are you doing this to me?
She's leaving because of Adric.
Yes, she is.
The way that they were fighting in the TARDIS in that last scene before she dips out, she was just fed up with him. She was like, it doesn't matter that they were slavers. I have got to get out of this box with you.
She really didn't leave because of the doctor. She just left because of Adric.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all because Adric was like, can we leave? And she suddenly decided that ending slavery has always been her life calling. How dare he suggest that they need to get out and leave these all-powerful beings to their own devices?
Oh, I love that. So we have our plot device of the, dwarf star alloy?
Yep, it has to be made of that because it's the only thing that can contain the Tharils, but also the fact that it's made of that is what's making this little void contract. So nice little dual use there.
But somehow is also soft enough that Romana can just rip it off the ship?
But it's very heavy.
It was the damaged area.
Yeah.
Okay.
How did it get damaged? If it's so strong, what damaged it?
Yeah, we don't get the story of necessarily how they ended up there. The slavers, I mean. Do we?
Mm-hmm.
We only just see them trying to get out. We don't know how they got themselves in this situation.
Especially because the hole that they're standing at the hull, when we see it from the outside, when Romana rips off the star alloy, looks like a blast.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's that moment where in part 1, Birok is piloting and it looks like they almost collide with the TARDIS. And that's when everything kind of goes to shit for them and Birok escapes. So I guess that's kind of what caused the damage, but
that seems weak.
Okay.
Also, they keep talking about this like backblast. And I'm just like, is this really the term that we want to use for it? A backblast?
Oh, man.
oh boy.
I had that in my pocket, and I was going to mention that, but you beat me to the punch. I'm glad someone else noticed that as well. It hasn't aged well.
It really hasn't. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, you don't have to get so descriptive of the thing you're trying to do.
Right.
Have another name for it. Call it anything else.
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about is that little showdown between the Doctor and Rorvik, where Rorvik is just nasty. Like, he steps on the Doctor's hand as the Doctor's trying to climb up, and then he tries to strangle the Doctor with his own scarf. What a dick.
I loved it. I hadn't seen this much like physicality with a Doctor in a long time. And it was interesting because the last time I saw something like that, it was Third Doctor and he was, beating the crap out of somebody. It wasn't the Doctor getting whooped. And it does a good job of showing how horrible our villain is. I enjoyed it.
The moment where he says everything breaks eventually and then the Doctor falls back was definitely one of those moments where I was shocked a little, but then it was also very Lion King for me. And I kind of enjoyed that moment a lot. But yeah, that whole section was very aggressive.
Yeah. And then we have his big, unfortunately, last speech where he, as I mentioned before, is just wants to get something accomplished. That's all he wants. And then he gets blown up. So we got that accomplished.
Poor Rorvik.
Yeah.
Actually quite pathetic in the end. Let's talk about Romana's goodbye.
Very abrupt goodbye.
Yeah, I wish they had had some kind of scene, even if they had just shot something, which I get that they were fighting more than they were shooting for this episode. But if they had shot some scene, even with Laszlo and Romana in the back being like whispering, anything to make more than just in the first episode where they drop the very subtle hint, for it to be just so suddenly, I'm leaving. Anything to suggest that she'd even talk to them about joining their little escapade.
Yeah, I know that old classic Who fans get annoyed with this over sentimentality of the new show, the new series. But I really feel like in situations like this, when you're having a companion leave the show, I'm not asking for a giant sweep in music and a full montage or anything like that. But I think a nice little touch would have been good. Maybe put something in the very first episode of this serial where there's an object that they're having a conversation about that's something you would keep in your pocket, like a watch or a pen or something. And they have some sort of emotional back and forth about it. And then at the very end, she doesn't have to have a big goodbye with the Doctor. She goes off with Lionel or whatever, and the Doctor goes away. But then after they've separated, she just kind of looks at the pen and smiles or something. That's all you got to do.
You know what they could have done with it in this episode?
What's that?
A coin.
Hey, bingo. How about that? Good one. Yeah.
Also, Reilly, did you just call him Lionel?
Yeah.
Because that's amazing.
Lionel.
Lionel, Thundercat reference.
Yeah, Thundercats.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You were thinking about Messi. No.
For a minute, yeah. And also, K9 has all the plans to duplicate a TARDIS, so Romana's literally going to go off and be the Doctor in E-Space.
Except they're not in E-Space. They're in the weird dream world. Who knows if it's even real? Where
do you get the materials to make a TARDIS? They're kind of limited on materials, aren't they?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Who knows what the Tharils can conjure up. I do love the Doctor and Adric's little back and forth, where Adric asks, will Romana be all right? And the Doctor responds with, all right, she'll be superb.
Yeah, no, that's a nice touch.
Yeah.
That's a nice touch.
I think he's sad. I do think he's sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, bad news for Adric. There's, there is a airlock that he could be pushed out of, and there's no witnesses now.
Shut up. No.
Wow. You want a Katarina, Adric?
Dang.
Let's see, your math medal get you out of this one, guy.
Hot damn. Well, we end the story with Romana, K9, and Birok walking off into the distance. And that takes us to the end. So, let's do our running metrics first. I did not catch any I'll explain laters. Anyone else?
Nope.
Mm-mm.
No quarries, no jelly babies. Anything for the camp count?
No, I don't have anything.
No.
Wow, this season is distinctly uncamp in comparison to the last few. Well, let's go ahead and rate this, and Julie, you're up first.
All right. When I first watched this, I did have the unfortunate bit of having to do this all at once. And so I wouldn't say it dragged for me, but it's just whenever I sit down and watch all of these back to back to back, it gets a little bit rough for me. And so it's definitely gone up in my opinion since talking about it. There are some really excellent elements in it. The music was very well done, which is saying something for me since, I'm not usually a synth heavy person. So I liked the bit with the slavers being the enslaved, being then the slavers. Some of that kind of stuff was going in a really interesting direction, which we don't necessarily see in Doctor Who all the time. And I really think it just fell flat with the Romana and K9 exit. I think they could have done a little bit more with that and made me have a few more feelings than I did. So I'm going to give it 7.5. Romana just piecing out of 10.
All right, Reilly.
I don't think I emphasized enough how much I enjoyed the visuals here. I love the sets. I think the sets inside the slaver ship look great. I love that dual deck look that they have there. I think the concept is original. I think some of the plot changes are not. It's Lala Ward's best performance I've seen of her entire run on the show, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to see her best it because that's it. Adric made me laugh, and I did not have any moments where I got too irritated with him. Baker was fine, and overall, this is pretty good, I think, looking back at it and after discussing it with everyone. So I think I also will come in at 7.5 Romana cleaning litter boxes in E-Space out of 10.
Oh, no. All right, Diana, where are you landing on this one?
I'm definitely in a similar camp. I like it better after talking about it. And I really liked the visuals. I thought it was a really interesting way of trying to tell the story. I liked the fantasy elements of the lions and the dream world and how they decided to tell that story. I even liked the aspect of the fact that the Tharils were a little bit out in their own world and never really making eye contact or interacting in a major way. I liked the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern characters. I thought they were very strong. And overall, except for, the manner in which Romana announced her departure and the treatment of K9, I actually really liked the panic in K9's voice the whole time, where he is aware nobody's listening to him. It was a great story, and I would definitely rewatch this one again, looking at how much I've enjoyed talking about it. So I am giving it actually also a 7.5 Skeleton Knight crew out of 10.
Well, I think we're all aligned because I'm landing in the same spot as everyone else. This is a 7.5 for me, and I think you all have done a great job at highlighting what's really good about this story. The visuals, phenomenal. K9, yes, he's done dirty, but as was just said, the panic in his voice and the way he's played was really, really good. Romana was 100% at her best. Wish we'd had more of the second Romana like this rather than just kind of this story, Horns of Naimon, and maybe one or two more. But really, she was great here. Not much of Adric. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I thought the makeup and prosthetics on the Tharils looked pretty good. I did like the asshole captain, and I did also like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. So yeah, 7.5 tossed canines.
Hey, I'm really proud of us. None of us gave it 7 or 7.5 full-blown back blasts out of 10.
Dang.
We're not really children, we promise.
I did consider calling it a loaded pamper, but
Well, that gives us a story average of 7.5, which is one of our stronger ones this season. So cool. Well, next time we are heading back to End Space as we move beyond Romana with the Keeper of Traken. But in the meantime, as always, thank you so very much for listening. And of course, have a good one. You have been listening to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension with Diana Burney, Reilly Schreck, Julie Philippek, and myself, Anthony Williams. This episode, The Printer and the BabyBjörn, was recorded on Monday the 9th of November 2024. If this is your first time listening into the show, all of our previous episodes are available wherever you like to get your podcasts. You can interact with us on Facebook and Instagram at @Watchers4D, and you can also email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, please do subscribe and consider leaving us a review or rating on your favorite podcasting app. All of those things really do help the show. And always remember, even when Doctor Who gives us the weird, Reilly will still wish that it were weirder.
But
also...
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Romana. Romana, God damn it. Go ahead, Diana.
Wow. That was an elevation in status. Yeah.
Look at that.
Dang, I'll take it.